Hi, everyone. How delicious was that lunch? Many thanks to Taco Del Mar. Very fantastic. While I am doling out the thanks, I've enjoyed this whole day so far, and these things don't just magically happen on their own. There's been a group of very dedicated people that have been planning this for a year, and I pop into meetings 1 out of every 15 times, and I usually late, and then I usually leave early. But there are those that are very dedicated, and that, of course, is none other than Cora Doctor. This whole thing is happening because of Cora. Let's please give it up for her. And I'm not forgetting you, Sarah. You're going to stand up in the back. We've got Sarah Kemp-Tabbitt in the back. She works for the VA, works in suicide prevention. Sarah, you're great. She designed everything. She's kept us all rolling. And many, many thanks to our partners at First Link, who, where's Jennifer and Ashley? They were sitting here. Maybe they walked out to go sit at their table or man the registration. But they handled all the registration and stuff for us. So many thanks, of course, to First Link. And because of First Link, speaking of which, we all know now about 988 being the national hotline, crisis hotline, and First Link is the group that manages it for North Dakota. And we are in the month of September, which of course is very important for suicide awareness. And with the number 988, September 8th is the 988 Awareness Day. So what better way to increase awareness of 988 than to wear one of these fancy, stylish Letterman jackets? So we're gonna auction a couple of these off right now. This very one being modeled by beautiful Cora. So she wanted me to point out is a wool coat with leather sleeves and a quilted, fuzzy, soft inside. She says the sizing is generous. This is a medium, generous medium. This is a medium for a football player. And if you'd like, you could have something embroidered right here to be in celebration of, in memory of, or whatever you'd like on there, or put your own name so that nobody steals your jacket. You gotta put your name on everything. I know that as a mother of a preschooler. On the tag, yes, of course. So, I know you weren't maybe really expecting to bid on things. We talked about it with the registration, of course, but we would love to sell this jacket to one of you. And we will, if this does well, we might have a second one to sell that you could customize your own. But we're gonna sell this exact jacket, take it right off of Cora's body, and you get to take it home. Then you're ready for winter, or you're ready for the in-betweeny season. I was able to wear this jean jacket clear up to like Christmas Eve last year because we had such a mild winter. They're saying La Nina is gonna have something to do with that this winter. But anyway, here we go. So I know we don't have bid numbers. Do we have paddles? You actually do? Just smiley face paddles? Smiley face or frowny face? You could be frowning about the price, but happy that you're bidding. It's all good. So I dabble and do auctions a little bit here and there, but there's something I always like to do before I start an auction when we're gonna sell something for a good cause. This money going back, of course, to suicide prevention. So I like to remind people that we're not here to get a good deal. So we're gonna do a quick little repeat after me. Are you ready? Wow, are you ready? One more time. Are we ready? There we go. All right, you're gonna repeat after me. Today is not about getting a good deal. Very good. Today is about suicide prevention. All right, today is not about getting a good deal. Today is about a fashionable Leatherman's jacket. There we go. All right. So if you've got a paddle and you're willing, just wave up your paddles. Let me see that you know how to do this here. Let me see that you know how to hold him up. There we go. You can act like we're interested. There we go. So Sarah's also going to be monitoring any bids online that might be happening. And Sarah's getting a paddle herself. She's interested. She's an interested buyer. Okay, so if any of you have had to purchase a Leatherman's jacket for yourself or a child, you know that these things aren't necessarily cheap. But let's see how we do here. Let's start the bidding here at an easy, breezy, cool $10,000, and this thing can be yours. If not, all right, let's jump it down to 50 bucks. Who's in for 50 bucks for a new jacket? I got 50 over here, looking for 75. Anybody in for 75? Looking for 75. $75 in the back now, 100, looking for one, looking for one, looking for 100. She says yes to 100, how about 1 1/4? Anybody in for 125, 125, 125? She says yes to 1 1/4, looking for 1 1/2. Anybody in for 150, 150, 150? We're still below the money on this one. Looking for 150. She says yes to 150, looking for 175. Anybody in for 175? I got 150. She says yes to 175, looking for two, looking for two, looking for 200. Who's in for $200? I'm at 175, looking for two, looking for two. Anybody in for two? She says yes to 200, looking for 2 1/4. Looking for 225, 225, 225. I'm at 200. She says yes to 225. Let's cheer her on. I'm looking for 250 to keep this one moving. We're at 225, looking for 250. Anybody want to jump in at 250? 250 right there. Now 275, 275, 275. Looking for 2 3/4, as they say on the block. Looking for two. She says 275, looking for three, looking for three, looking for 300. I'm at 275 over here, looking for three. Anybody want to jump in at 300? $300. $300 over there. Thank you so much. Now I'm up to 325. Looking for 325 to keep this one alive. She says yes to 325. Looking for 350. Anybody in at 350? She says yes to 350. 375. Anybody at 375? I'm at 350 down front, looking for 375. I bet you the high school kids down the hall are wondering what the hell is going on in here. We're yes at 375. I'm looking for four. Anybody for 400? Looking for $400. I'm at 375 over here. Looking for four. Looking for four. Looking for 400. Anybody in for $400? $400. I'm selling it for 375 right here. Well done. You're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. All right. Should we sell another one? We can customize the next one. You can pick your own color. You can get your embroidery and stuff like we talked about earlier, but if you want, you know, a pink theme, a more purpley theme, whatever it might be, you can customize your own jacket. So let's start that one. We'll see where this one goes. This one just sold for $375. Let's start the next one at $100. $100, you can customize it yourself and walk away with it. I'm at 100 right here, looking for 125. Let's build it back up. 125 in the back, thank you. Now 150. Looking for 150, 150, 150. 150 over there at the table, thank you so much. Now 175, 175, 175. Yes, do you want to do two? I'm at 175 here. Do you want to do 200? She says yes to two, looking for 225, 225. 225 in the back, now 250. Looking for 250. Anybody for 2.5, 2.5, 2.5. Looking for $250. $250 right there, now 275. She says yes to 275, looking for three, looking for three, looking for 300. 275 over here, now three, looking for 300. $300 over there, now 3 1/4. Anybody want to do 3 1/4? I'm at 300 right here, looking for 325. 325, now 350. It's don't be a quitter. She's at 325. You were so close to winning the last one. 350. You want to do 350? 350. She says yes to 350. 375. 375. Now 4. You want to do 400? $400. It's only money. You can go to work tomorrow. You're enjoying this nice lavish conference. Taco Del Mar. Things don't get, and those Costco cookies, the Scotcheroo ones, those ones are the best. Those ones are new. 400. You want to do 400? $400. She says yes to 400. There she goes. Looking for 425. You want to do? She says no. Anybody else want to jump in at 425? 425. 425. Looking for 425 to keep it alive. I'm selling it $400. Well done. I mean, I know that we talked earlier today about not bullying people and avoiding the peer pressure, but that was fun. That was fun. You're a good sport. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your stories. And thank you for supporting this wonderful cause. I'm going to turn it back over to Joelle, who's up next. Well, I know. Well, I'm sure you could do a cartwheel or something. No, okay.
All right. Ooh, that was exciting. I really want to become an auctioneer, but I know that I would not do as well as Katie and her sister. They are quite the duo. So our next speaker is Liz Sweet, and she is the wife of a Vietnam vet, mom to 2 sons and 2 daughters, and a grandmother to 2 granddaughters. She was born and raised in North Dakota and graduated from the University of North Dakota in 1974 with a bachelor's in social work, and from NDSU in 1985 with a master's degree in guidance counseling. In January of this year, Liz retired from 26 years of federal service with the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration. And so before we have Liz speak, we are going to have Cody come up and share some data with us.
Good afternoon. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but in case there's anybody new online or even in person here, I'm going to be providing data that comes from the North Dakota Violent Death Reporting System. It is a system that collects information on suicide fatalities in our state, so that's where all the data comes from. And I'm going to be talking about what we have collected so far around our current or former military members or veterans. There we go. Okay, so since we started collecting data in 2019, we've had 126 suicides in this population group. 95% of the suicide deaths were males with the average age of 51 years. And then when we looked at some of the circumstances surrounding these deaths, we found that 29% had previous suicidal thoughts or ideation, and 13% had a history of suicide attempts. Again, that's only known if it is reported on a law enforcement report or coroner's report, so these could be underreported. 25% recently had disclosed suicidal thoughts or intent to die by suicide prior to their death. 29% left a suicide note behind, and the primary method used was firearms at 74%. So you definitely see an increase in firearm usage in this population group. When we looked at who the disclosures were made to, most of the time it was to intimate partners at 61%, and friends and colleagues, and then other family members for the 16 and 13%, and then some that are less than that. So if we go to, I gotta do the next slide, sorry. So this slide kind of goes over some of the circumstances, stressors, risk factors that we've identified for this population group. You can see them all listed on the right-hand side. When looking at all the contributing circumstances, 88% of these deaths had multiple contributing circumstances. Nearly 46% of the victims were reportedly in a current depressed mood. Oh, it did not go to the next slide. I lied, sorry. And over 46% of the victims had a current mental health diagnosis, and then 29% were ever being treated for their mental health or substance use problem. And just over 41% had alcohol in their system, with the average blood alcohol concentration being 1.66, or 0.166. And if you look on the right-hand side, it kind of goes over what we find most in these cases. Depression was identified most often, followed by intimate partner problem, an alcohol problem, and then a physical health problem. And argument and job problems were after that. But you can see that between all the times I've talked about today, what those top factors or triggers or stressors are looks different for each of the population groups. But you always see alcohol, intimate partner, and depression kind of leading the way with most of these breakouts. I don't know if anyone has any questions. If not, I will step to the side to let Liz come up here and speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm probably the shortest person that you've seen all day. First of all, I wanted to just take a second to remember those friends and family of the folks in Georgia who were killed yesterday in the school shooting, and our hearts go out to all of them. I would like to share a 10-minute video that was done in Washington, D.C. when I gave a presentation at headquarters. And it's about 10 minutes long. And when it's over, I'll come back and see you on the other side. Good morning, everyone. You have already met our SAMHSA Assistant Secretary Miriam on the previous panel, and she has identified for all of us at SAMHSA this year as the Year of Hope. And I would like to share greetings from SAMHSA's Office of Recovery and our Director, Paolo Del Vecchio. I am a woman with a diagnosis of clinical depression and the mother of a son with mental health challenges. I would like to open my remarks this morning with a poem entitled Welcome to Holland by Emily Pearl Kingsley. I am often asked to describe the experience of raising a child with a disability to help people who have not shared that unique experience to understand it and to imagine how it would feel. It's like this. When you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous vacation in Italy. You buy guidebooks and you make wonderful plans. The Colosseum, Michelangelo's David, the gondolas in Venice. You may even learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. After months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives, you pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands and the stewardess says, "Welcome to Holland." Holland? What do you mean, Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life, I've dreamed of Italy. But there's been a change in the flight plan. You've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is, they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine, and disease. It's just a different place. So now you must go and buy new guidebooks. You must learn a whole new language. And you will meet a whole new group of people you would never have otherwise met. It's just a different place. It's slower paced than Italy and less flashy than Italy. But after you've been there for a while, you catch your breath, you look around, and you begin to notice Holland has windmills. Holland has tulips. Holland even has Rembrandts. Everyone you know is busy coming and going from Italy, and they're all bragging about what a wonderful time they had while they were there. For the rest of your life, you will say, yes, that's where I was supposed to go. That's what I had planned. The pain of that will never, ever, ever go away, because the loss of that dream is a very significant loss. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to go to Italy, you may never be free to enjoy the very special, the very lovely things about Holland. So now, I want to introduce you to my tour guide to Holland. This is my husband and my son, TJ, who would have been 43 years old this year. TJ was diagnosed with ADHD at age 2 after being seen by a child neurologist for a possible sleep disorder. The diagnosis was further confirmed after he got out of his crib during one night and could be heard having a tantrum, and I mean a tantrum. But we couldn't find him. After several frantic minutes of looking for him, we found him in our backyard, upset because he couldn't get the gate on the fence open to get out. In talking with the neurologist about how to keep him safe, we were advised to lock the door on his bedroom at night from the outside. This was the beginning of our family's journey into isolation and lack of support. My husband was a teacher. I was a social worker, licensed professional counselor, and a licensed drug and alcohol counselor. Both of us, our professional friends, and us were mandated reporters. We no longer invited our friends to our home because there was no way to explain the need to lock your 2-year-old son in his room at night. Both our families started inviting us to fewer family functions because there was no way to predict what direction TJ's energy for the day would take us and what might get broken in the process. Our church was no longer an inviting community. The looks of annoyance that we were given when his lack of attentiveness got in the way of their being able to enjoy the service made it clear we were no longer welcome. This meant that either my husband or I were going to have to stay home while the other attended church with our 2 daughters. No longer able to have friends over to our home, enjoy time with our extended family, or attend Sunday worship services, we were left isolated from the very people we should have been able to reach out to for support. We were then asked not to bring our son back to preschool, where he was attending, and we couldn't find another preschool for him. When TJ started kindergarten, I needed to advocate for services and an individualized education plan for him in our neighborhood school, and advocate I did. To the point that my husband was visited in his classroom by his department chair and was asked the question, "Do you like your job?" My husband shared he did, and was then told, "Then you better get your wife to back off." My husband's response was, "Obviously, you don't know my wife." This experience further pushed us into isolation, and I began having suicidal and homicidal ideations. My plan was to put myself and our son in our car in the garage, turn the car on, and lift the burden from my husband's shoulders and allow our daughters to have a normal childhood without the pressures of dealing with their brother's behavior. Obviously, I didn't follow through with the plan, but I was sinking further and further into depression and not being able to provide for our son's needs. We were able to get him some of the services he needed at school, and with the help of the Vietnam Agent Orange lawsuit and their fund, we were able to get him some adaptive equipment that he was able to use. My husband is a Vietnam veteran who served in Vietnam from '68 to '69 and was sprayed with Agent Orange. Our 3 biological children all have disabilities attributed to his exposure to Agent Orange, and TJ's was ADHD. TJ made it through school. By going to summer school each year, he was able to graduate a semester early and enlist in the Army. My husband and I were not excited about his choice, but he was determined. He left for basic training and loved it. He flourished in basic training and felt like he had found where he belonged. He served for 5 years and was deployed to Iraq in September of 2003. He celebrated his 23rd birthday in October, and November 27th of 2003, on Thanksgiving Day, he died as a result of suicide. I share all of this with you because I want you to know that as you drive down the street you live on, or walk down the hallway of the apartment building you live in, or walk past the office doors or cubicles where you work, you have no idea what the people behind those doors or in those cubicles might be going through and how isolated they may be feeling, even though they have a smile on their face that hides what's happening in their life. At SAMHSA, we had a campaign a few years back called What a Difference a Friend Makes. During this month of May, I hope you reach out and check on your friends and see how they are doing. I want to tell you about 3 of my friends. One, Pat Baker, who is a peer specialist. The moment that I called and said, Pat, TJ has died, she said, I'll be right there. She flew across the country to come and hold my hand and hold my heart. The second person I want to tell you about is Connie Wells. Had it not been for Connie, the previous picture that you saw would not have been possible. And that picture is the last kiss I got from my son before he boarded the bus to the airport. My third friend is Carlotta McCleary. All of these women I have known for over 35 years. Carlotta is really that friend who, when I was coming back from travel, I'd locked myself out of my house. And 12:30 at night, I picked up the phone and I said, Carlotta, can I come and sleep at your house? She said, absolutely. Those are the kinds of friends that I hope each and every one of you have. After our son's death, I became clinically depressed again, and with the help of a wonderful psychiatrist and a support organization for families of military members who have lost their lives called TAPS, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, I've been able to find people who are walking the same journey I am, and through peer-to-peer support, my life is again filled with hope. I hope that any of you or a family member who find yourself struggling with a mental health challenge or in a mental health crisis, please use SAMHSA's 988 crisis line. You can access 988 24/7, and it provides access for you to trained crisis counselors who help people experiencing mental health related distress, and can be accessed by anyone, either by texting or by chatting. If you or your family members are dealing with substance abuse challenges, please use SAMHSA's treatment locator to find help in your area. I also want to reinforce what the secretary this morning said about the new program that is being launched and rolled out about findsupport.gov. It's a new user-friendly website which is designed for the public and will help people identify resources and find a way to pay for treatment. I want you to know you are not alone. There is hope, and I hope you reach out to a friend. Welcome to Holland. So this afternoon, I was asked today to share our family's journey past our son's suicide. First, if what you're looking for and hoping for is a story that ends in, and they lived happily ever after, this might be where you make your way to the hallway to check your email and return those 100 phone calls that are waiting for you. I won't be offended, but this is not going to be a happily ever after. TJ in Iraq. One of the things that I didn't talk about on that video was that in full disclosure and transparency, we honestly don't know whether TJ's death was a suicide or not. So I'm here at a suicide prevention conference speaking to you, not knowing how our son actually died. And I'll give you a glimpse into what happened. On Thanksgiving Day at 1:30 in the afternoon, there was a knock at our door. and for all of those movies that you've seen where that dreaded knock happens. It was Thanksgiving Day, and so people were tied up, and there was one person that came to our door, and that typically does not happen, but it was one person who came to our door, and it was a chaplain. And he said, I'm here to let you know that your son was killed by another military member in the barracks, and more information will be forthcoming with your casualty affairs officer. And he left. And all I could think about was, why would someone kill TJ? What in the hell happened? So I sat with that. Our 2 daughters were with me. My husband was spending Thanksgiving with his brother in Bemidji, Minnesota. And I tried to get a hold of him, and my husband is notorious. He doesn't answer his cell phone. And so I was having difficulty getting a hold of him. And the girls and I called a couple of our friends who came over right away. And I said, what could have happened? What possibly could have happened that somebody would have killed him? So the next day, on Friday, the casualty affairs officer came to our home. And the casualty affairs officer said, I'm sorry to inform you, you were given erroneous information by the notification officer, and we don't know what happened to your son. It's under investigation, and as information becomes available, you will get it. So we went from somebody killed him to now we don't know what happened. And as soon as my husband and I were able to talk by phone, he got on a plane and flew out to Washington, D.C., which is where I work. And through the process of all of the activity around the casualty affairs officer and the notification officer, nobody could give us any clear information about what was happening. And then we got a letter from the company commander saying, I'm sorry to inform you that your son died as a result of suicide. So we went from somebody killed him to we don't know what happened to he died as a result of suicide. Our daughter was working in an agency where one of her supervisors was a ballistics expert for the state of Virginia. And he said, Liz, would you be willing to share the report that you got when it was finally made available? And he said, I'm just really curious. So we shared the report with him. And not 24 hours later, he came back to me and he said, Liz, I don't know what happened over there, but he said, I can tell you that TJ did not take his own life. He said, just the description of the wound tells me that his arms were not long enough to hold an M16 that far away from his head to make that kind of a wound. So he said, I don't know what happened, but your son didn't take his own life. So is TJ's death a suicide? I don't know. I will only know when I arrive in heaven and get to hear from him what happened. Does TJ fit in those categories that we've heard over and over and over again? Yeah, I could tick off many of those things, and they would be true, and I would say yes. So, the Army deemed TJ's death a suicide. He's had 3 death certificates. The last one that the Army issued says that his death was as a result of a suicide. So my response was, okay, we asked to meet with folks from the Department of Defense in Representative Pomeroy's office to go over the report and find out, why are there all of these inconsistencies? I made it my mission to make sure that no one else died from suicide that was deployed from Fort Riley, Kansas. And I became their worst nightmare. Every time that someone was giving a talk about military suicide, I was lucky enough that my employer at SAMHSA gave me time whenever I asked for it to go to those kinds of presentations. So the first one was a military suicide prevention conference in Florida. And Colonel Elsbeth Ritchie was the head of the campaign that they were putting on. And I sat in the front row. And when she was done, she had been in Congressman Pomeroy's office. When she was done and she asked if there were questions, I was polite. I waited until everyone else got their questions answered, and then I raised my hand. And I said, I don't have a question as much as I have a comment. And I was so glad today when our wonderful epidemiologist said from this podium, these aren't numbers, these are people. There's a person behind every one of these numbers. Because that's what I said to Elsbeth Ritchie. I don't ever want to hear you talk about the suicides that are happening within the military and give them a number. They have a mom, they have a dad, they have grandparents, they have siblings. They're not a number. So, from that point on, Elsbeth Ritchie knew I was on a mission. And just like I advocated for TJ when he was in first grade, I advocated for him in his death. And I kept saying, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? I want an answer. What are you going to do? Well, about a year later, that wonderful organization that I talked about, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, we were invited to Admiral Mullen's house for Christmas. And Admiral Mullen was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Not a small. And all of us had to go through a security clearance before we could attend. And I got a little call saying, Liz, they're reviewing your clearance and we may have a glitch. And I said, oh, what's wrong? And Bonnie Carroll said, Liz, I don't know how to say this very politely, so let's just get it out of the way. Your security clearance from the Department of Defense says, this is not in quotes, this is one pissed off mama and she's not going anywhere. Well, they passed my security clearance. Our family went to Admiral Mullen's home, and he was so gracious and so kind. And he said, Liz, what can I do for you? And I said, I just want you to ask them to go through that report one more time. And he said, "You tell me what you want." I said, "I want them to demonstrate for me how this happened. Were his arms long enough to have done what they say happened?" He said, "You got it." So out to Quantico we went. And when we arrived, I brought along a life-size poster cutout of TJ. And I set it in the chair at the head of the table. And one of the lead detectives said, "Can you give us a little background?" I said, "Yeah, I just want you to know who it is that you're talking about." I said, "This is my son. He's not that case number that you referred to." So from Admiral Mullen, we moved to General Lori Sutton, who is the most wonderful human being you will ever run into. And she and I worked together on an interagency work group. The very first time that I met her, she said, in her general tone, "Liz, what would you like for me to know about how we can work together?" I said, "Well, I could either be your worst enemy or I can be your best asset." She goes, "Oh, I want you to be my best asset." And that was when they were standing up the Center for Psychological Excellence at Bethesda. And from that came many of the programs that the Department of Defense now has implemented. Doesn't mean that the suicides have gone away. It doesn't mean that they're decreasing, but there are programs there that were not there before. General Mark Graham and his wife, Carol, who I met at that DOD suicide prevention conference in Florida, are two of our best friends. Carol and Mark had two sons. Their first son died as a result of suicide while he was in getting ready to go away to AIT. And he ended his life. And his brother was at Fort Riley, where my son was. And TJ had left in September, and their son shipped out in October. So there was probably a month when they might have interacted. We have no idea whether they knew each other or not. And he was out on patrol with his unit and stepped on a mine, and they lost both of their sons, one to suicide, one to a combat mission. And Mark never, ever, ever starts a presentation without saying, "Both of my sons were at war. One was at war with an internal enemy, and my second son was at war with an enemy on the ground in Iraq." Mark now is the director of the Vets for Vets program that's across the country, but is headquartered out of New Jersey. And they do peer-to-peer work in a way that's innovative and is really making a difference in the lives of veterans who are having struggles with mental health issues. The other person who was most affected by TJ's death was Senator Conrad. We had been friends with him for a very long time. His daughter and our daughter started kindergarten together. So we watched our daughters grow together. And he was one of the pallbearers at TJ's funeral. And when he left office and decided to retire, he said, Liz, putting TJ and that casket into that hearse from the church to the cemetery, he said, changed everything for me while I was in the Senate. If you remember, Senator Conrad was the last person who spoke before they made the decision to fund the war in Iraq. So when TJ died and we asked him to be a pallbearer, afterwards he said, Liz, whenever there is an issue that comes up about the war in Iraq, I immediately have a flashback to putting that casket in that hearse. And he said, I see this war in a totally different way than I would have before. We're still in communication with 4 guys from TJ's unit. They have reached out to us with survivor guilt and suicidal ideation of their own. Each is doing better now, but each still has their days, and they still feel a need to talk with us. The first one is Roger Nixon, who believes that he was the last person to talk to TJ before he died. And he said, Liz, my choice was to get to formation on time or to stop and talk to TJ. And he said, I chose to go to formation on time. And he said, now that haunts me every single day. What if I had stopped and talked to him? A sergeant, not in TJ's chain of command, outside his chain of command, played anime on the weekends with TJ, and they got to be really good friends. And the day of deployment, he said to me, he gave me a big hug, and he said to me, Liz, I'll bring him home for you. And he has lived with, Liz, I couldn't keep my promise. I didn't keep my promise. Mike Yates from Iowa, who was in TJ's unit, TJ didn't like to drive. He hated driving. But one of the things that he bought with his re-enlistment bonus was a car because he was getting tired of riding his bike on the ice in Kansas. He gave the keys to Mike, and he said, I'll supply the car and the gas and the insurance. You be the driver. So when TJ died, we gave his car to Mike. And Mike says, Liz, when I'm in that car, he said, I know TJ is riding shotgun with me. And he said, I think of him every single day that I get in that car. Jeremy Croy, who was TJ's battle buddy. And the battle buddy is there to make sure he's got your back. And Jeremy talks about, Liz, I let him down, I let him down, I let you down. So we have spent a lot of time with those 4 fellows talking about what I've asked them is, I asked them to write me a letter telling me about one incident where TJ made them laugh. And each one of them has done that. And Roger in particular said, Liz, every time I think about what are the things that TJ and I used to laugh about, he said, that's the time when I know it's okay. He's still looking out for me. He said, I have one example that I know for sure he's still looking out for me. He said, there was a creditor while I was in Iraq who harassed me and harassed me and harassed me. And he said, there was nothing I could do from Iraq. And he said, they kept doing it after I got back. And he said, last week, I got a call right after you and I talked about one of the stories that made me laugh about TJ. And he said, the creditor said my bill was paid in full. He said, I know TJ did that. These 4 young men have helped us remember our son TJ and to stay focused on the recovery and putting our one foot in front of the other. They give me hope, and they have assured us that we give them hope. So how have we coped? Our friends, you heard me talk about Carlotta in that video. Carlotta and I have been together for over 35 years now. And one of the things that we did when our kids were little, the Federation of Families used to have a potluck once a month, and we all got together. Our kids who had difficulty making friends knew they had friends once a month in that potluck. Our kids reminded us when that potluck was supposed to happen. It was that important to them. And Carlotta has continued to be a friend for all of that time. TAPS, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivor, like I said, are families who are walking the same walk in the same path that we're walking. My job that allowed me to focus on this as an issue from a federal perspective and a national viewpoint. And my dog, Belle. I have a 5-pound Chihuahua who thinks that her home is in my shirt. And so when, as a result of COVID, all of us were working remotely, at some point during the remote, her head would pop up out of my shirt, and everybody would laugh and say, oh my God, there she is. And if she didn't, somewhere as we were ending the call, somebody would say, Belle, where are you? Belle, Belle. She'd hear her name, and out would pop her head. And she has been my lifesaver. I do want to talk about one thing that I have not heard yet this morning, and that's the health consequences of the journey that we've been on. One of the moms at TAPS said, I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2012 and had a double mastectomy. And she said to me, Liz, were you surprised? And I said, I don't know that I was surprised, but I was a little taken aback. And she said, when a mother's heart is shattered, those pieces of that heart have to go somewhere. And she said, I can only imagine that breast cancer was a part of that broken heart. For my husband, who, if I could just see a raise of hands, any of you attend or graduate from Bismarck High? If you attended before 2003, my husband might have been your driver's ed instructor. He taught driver's ed in the summer. He taught industrial arts during the year. And he has Agent Orange-related diabetes, and a couple of weeks ago was diagnosed with incurable and inoperable non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so 55 years after he left Vietnam, he is still waging a war with Agent Orange. And I truly believe that a lot of that is from the stress of what happened to TJ when a dad who fights a war and comes home. And all of those Vietnam vets, this is what concerns me and that I don't think that the VA is taking a look at, is those dads who fought in Vietnam, came home, did what they needed to do to raise a family, only to watch their own sons and daughters sent to Afghanistan and Iraq and not come home. And there was nothing they could do to save them. That group of Vietnam vets, I wish the VA would spend more time looking at, because I think they're paying a price, and this has taken a toll beyond what anybody can imagine. So 55 years after Vietnam and 21 years after our son's death, yesterday, for the first time, I convinced my husband to go to the vet center and attend a group with other Vietnam vets. And when I picked him up an hour and a half later, I said, "Well, what did you think?" He said, "Well, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be." I said, "What did you think it was going to be?" "Well, I don't know," but he said, "We didn't even talk about Vietnam." He said, "We just talked about anything that anybody wanted to talk about." So I am hoping and praying that every Wednesday when he goes to that group, he finds the camaraderie of people that he hasn't found to this point. So what are the solutions? The solution for our family has been hope, purpose, friends, and relationships. Our friends are the relationships with people who really care about us. It's not their job. They're not getting a paycheck. They're the people who call us and say, "How are you doing? Are you okay?" And I am lucky enough that I had Carlotta here in Bismarck, so when we were home for the summers, I knew Carlotta was not far away. But in Washington, D.C., I had the privilege and it's more than a friendship. But Shar Olson, who is also from here in Bismarck, but also works at SAMHSA, when I needed somebody, Shar was there 2 floors away, and I would call and say, "Shar, have you got a minute?" And within a few seconds, she was standing at my desk. I am lucky enough that I have people in both places. I want to share with you a social media post. And for those of you who have raised your kids with Eeyore and Tigger and Pooh, this is from a social media post that I love. It says, "Include people, even if they're not the funniest nor the most talkative. Everyone is fighting their own battle. Just be good to one another." The thing is, Eeyore was clinically depressed, but his friends never left him out. They never expected him to be happy on their adventures. They loved him for who he was and never, ever left him behind. Since there have been billions of dollars spent on suicide prevention, and we are still looking for ways to prevent it, I would like to share the following. I want to leave you with a thought and a call to action. TJ took us on Mr. Toad's wild ride through the world of mental health. And I don't know how to describe it any more than that. There is no ride at Disneyland that is like the ride families go on in trying to access services in the world of mental health and addiction. First, I have a thought. A very good friend and a mentor of mine, Ron Gerhardt, who some of you may have known, told me we were attending a conference together, and Ron and I were sitting next to each other, and somebody made a comment in their speech that there were X number of people that they had saved from suicide. And Ron poked me and he said, "Liz, don't fall victim to taking credit for saving someone from suicide. If you do, you will also have to take responsibility for those who die." I've never forgotten that advice. Be very careful what you take credit for. My call to action is around implementation of the parity laws. We heard this morning earlier about the lack of parity between physical health and mental health. And I want you to really think about, where does parity stand in North Dakota? What kind of advocacy do we need around equal care for physical health and mental health? My call to action is I want each of you in the next 3 days to call 3 friends. These are friends that you've been thinking about but haven't talked to in over a month or so. See how they're doing. Reach out. You will never know the difference a friend makes and the hope that you might provide. Thank you.